the show today, we have Satish Misra ji. He is a veteran journalist and a political analyst as well. And we are having a conversation with him days after Supreme Court actually stayed some of the key provisions which were there in the Waqf Amendment Act 2025. So, first of all, thank you so much, Satish ji, for speaking with Asianet News on such an important topic today.
Topic is definitely very important as it touches the core of the constitutional values. So, thank you so much for inviting me for a discussion on this subject.
Asking you something on the stay on the provision which actually granted district collectors and government officials to actually go about deciding on the disputes over Waqf properties. Now, this is something which was, of course, passed in the bill in April this year. But now the Supreme Court has stayed this particular provision. Do you think that it is a big failure for the central government? It's a setback for them?
No, before we pronounce our view on whether it is good or bad for the central government, let us begin that the very purpose of enacting the Waqf Act or amending the Waqf Act was political largely. Undoubtedly, there are problems in the Waqf properties, and it could have been addressed administratively as well as amending some provisions of the earlier act. But the BJP governments or the BJP as a ruling party, main card is Hindu-Muslim. Unless they play on it, they can't, or they think that they can't remain in power. So what happened, as you saw, that the way the act was rushed to the Joint Parliamentary Committee, despite objections from the opposition members and all that, the chairman of the committee wanted to rush through the act as soon as possible. And then finally, because BJP and its allies have majority in both the houses of parliament, they could get the act enacted, and then President gave her assent to it. So, having said that, naturally, the Supreme Court is the forum where aggrieved parties or who think that a wrong act has been enacted had to approach. And they did approach. Now, Supreme Court, day before yesterday, came out with this judgment saying that they are staying certain provisions. Yes, and while rightly underlining that the legislature is fully competent and empowered to enact a law, which is the basic principle of separation of power in Constitution. Now, in the judgment of the bench presided by the Chief Justice B.R. Gawai, it said that certain provisions were wrong and were contravening the basic spirit of the law. Like, as you said, the district collectors being appointed as the final arbiter of the Waqf property. Now, imagine after all, the district collectors are the extended arm of the executive. So, executive is getting priority over it. Imagine, unless district collector's job is to implement, not judge. That is the basic principle. And the act had, in its wisdom, the ruling party in its wisdom had enacted that provision, and the Supreme Court very rightly has stayed, though final judgment is yet to come.
Right. Satish, I completely, buy this argument that, of course, there has to be a separation of power, and this is a case of executive overreach because definitely district collectors will fall under the government only. But, a lot of petitions which have been filed in Supreme Court and other courts of the country, they say that Waqf is something which disproportionately favors the Muslim population. why don't we have these kind of provisions for other religious communities? Because the land which belongs to these religious communities, they fall under direct government control. So why do we have a different setup for this particular community?
You see, I would welcome if a comprehensive act was enacted for all religious properties. I have no issue with that. But identifying the Muslims because it fits into the political propaganda and then enacting a law, I'm objecting to that. I mean, in the we are secular, Constitution defines us as a secular polity. There, if you enact a law which includes Christians, Sikhs, Hindus, and all that, then there will be lot many problems there. If you touch that, then the core constituency will not be very pleased with it. So what you do, you pick up Muslims, or that fits into your political propaganda, and enact a law. Now, fortunately, we still have a judiciary, though there are not much pressure on judiciary. We all know that it decided in its own wisdom that certain provisions need to be stayed unless a final verdict and judgment comes.
So even as we say and we support, there has to be an umbrella kind of a legal framework. There will remain a lot of complexities in that aspect as well. Satish, I also want to talk about the stay on the abolition of Waqf by user doctrine. Land, when we talk about that, okay, the land will be given to Waqf if it is in long-term use. And but the Supreme Court says that there needs to be a formal documentation in this particular case. Now, it is for all the the disputes that will come in future, but when we talk about the numerous petitions which are already there in the courts of India, what do we do about these disputed properties? Because Waqf has already claimed its authority on a lot of heritage and a lot of government land. So what do we do about these kind of cases? Will Supreme Court again come into the picture to have a say on it, or will all these petitions be clubbed? There will be anything in the future that we can speculate?
The fact remains that it is a very, very crucial aspect of the entire this Waqf properties. Fact remains that the authority which has been given to ASI and other institutions, I mean, imagine ASI has come into existence much after the Waqf concept came into being. So, Supreme Court must deliberate on this very, very deeply and should come out with a recommendation that which, see, unfortunately, one has to admit that there is a lot of malpractices going on in the Waqf properties. Nobody will deny that. But you have to have provisions in place which justify and which gives justice. Because unless justice is not given, our basic constitution provisions collapse. Justice is the fundamental factor. Now here, there are see what can be done as a suggestion, that the Muslims community's representatives must be taken on board. A discussion must ensue what should be done with such properties which are heritage properties. Now, in use, they are our common heritage. They are not only the heritage of the Muslims, this common heritage. Because when these properties came up, it was the state which had created, not Muslim individuals. Though there were Muslim rulers, and they built lot many forts and all that, and mosque and all that. Now here the question comes that these properties are fragile, they must be protected. Overuse will damage them. So, what you need a long term, a counseling and positivity in that regard, that such heritage monuments can be protected, this and certain rules can be made that on these days or once in a year, twice in a year, this can be used for this and that. See, your when your intentions are okay, then nobody will question. Problem here comes that you have, I mean, for example, uncertainty is there. You know the way these young people like Umar Khalid and all that have been languishing without bail for 5 years. I mean, the community will feel offended, will feel bad about it. So, in that kind of environment, you bring an act and arbitrary provisions you introduce, and Supreme Court has done rightly so. Supreme Court is yet to come with a final verdict. Let us see what it does. But in meanwhile, Supreme Court has said that these things can also be challenged. These states can be challenged. So let us see how Supreme Court progresses in its judgment. There will be not many hearings yet to be done. But welcome step way is that Supreme Court has done the district collector provision. It was the most crucial one because that gave not many power to the executive.
True. Of course, the final verdict will have to wait and watch because these are just the observations and not something which is final yet. But I also want to come to the imposition of limits on non-Muslim members on state Waqf boards and the Central Waqf Council. Do you think that this is something which the community will welcome?
See, listen, first of all, the Supreme Court has very rightly said there will not be more than 4 non-Muslims on the board of 22 people at the center, and at the state they said not more than 3 among the 11 members. Now it is rightly said, and also said the secretary of the Waqf board will be Muslim as far as possible. Now, as far as possible is a very tricky kind of a thing. Executive may say it was not possible and all that, but then Supreme Court must think on this also as far as possible. But it's a welcome thing that they have observed it and they have directed.
I also want to touch upon the Places of Worships Act because there are petitions still in courts. This particular ruling which Supreme Court made, where it said that we need to preserve the religious character of all these places and the status that was there on 15th of August 1947. Do you think that there'll be any sort of legal challenges that we'll see in our country playing out?
See, listen, that Religious Worship Act has already been challenged. Is under a lot of pressure. See, the act was enacted when after the Babri mosque demolition. Now, since then, BJP government has come to power, and it is doing every bit to dilute it, to undermine it, and ensure, if possible, that this Religious Worship Act is not enacted in its spirit. Now, so let us see how Supreme Court deals with it, because it is a very, very important act. See, imagine if you begin to reopen every little mosque which is happening. Imagine in Sambal it is happening, in Uttar Pradesh. Many places it is happening that suddenly the Vishwa Hindu Parishad and the Rashtriya Sevak Sangh organizations come up and say, under this mosque there was a temple. And the issue begins. So, Supreme Court has, in its own wisdom, must think it, um, consider it, and ensure what can be done to protect this law from such elements which are not shy of, you know, claiming any Muslim property as Hindu property.